Alright, after hours of work, my masterpiece is complete. Perfection couldn't be more obvious. Hey, Ahim. Oh, Soma. Wasn't expecting to see you. How was your daytime rest with old Valentine? I've seen things. Things I might not ever forget. Oh. Well, I pity you, boy. Speaking of which, what are they doing right now? Oh. When I left, she was playing some fighting game. God fucking damn it, Maria Renard, you stupid piece of shit! I see. Yeah, didn't hope either that I was playing with her and I was just so good at the game. You got kicked out? Oh, no, don't get it confused. I just saw myself out. I could tell she was starting to look like Hades from Hercules and I wasn't going to be there for that. Huh? Never mind that. Oh, almost forgot. Sarissa told me to call this guy named Walter, to check on how he's doing. Walter? Yeah, you know him? Oh, he and I are very much acquainted. Cool. Anyway, I'm gonna ring him up.
If you are trying to reach the phone of Walter Bernhard, please leave a message at the beep.
Huh. Wonder what he could be up to.
How in the fuck did I even get here?
Oh, finally! That must be the thing I ordered.
Valentine.
Hello everyone, this is editor Sarissa here, and I just wanted to say this before the video can formally begin. This video took way longer than it needed to be, and I blame entirely for the fact that a lot of stuff happening in my life kept pushing this video back, and the fact that this topic was a lot longer than I initially planned it to be, and plus all the editing takes time and whatnot. It's kind of why I haven't uploaded anything from late November to now late December or whenever this video will ever be released. And I just wanted to say that it's not because I wanted to drop YouTube as a whole, no, don't get it twisted. It's more so because of life stuff happening and the fact that this video took way too long to make. Hell, I wanted this video out by the end of November. It's now... well, I'm sure the time thing under the video should tell you that. But anyway, I just wanted to say, if you are thinking about staying and watching the video, I thank you a lot, and I really hope that all my effort that I poured into this ridiculously long review of Castlevania Judgement, like, seriously, out of all the reviews I checked of this game, mine will be by far the longest. I cannot believe I'm saying that. I will probably hold the title for having the longest Castlevania Judgement review. Not a thing to be proud of, but anyway, thank you my Cherryful Chariots for coming back again and allowing me to entertain you for I don't know how long this video is going to be. But once again, thank you and enjoy. Greetings my Cherryful Chariots. Glad we are here once again. Since you are here, allow me to paint a picture for you. The year was 2008. The Nintendo Wii hype was in full swing. Super Smash Bros. Brawl Mario Kart Wii had engulfed the world with strife. Random tripping, bullshit items, AI that hated your guts. You know, the good ages. Before that though, we had the DS, a debatably greater era for video games. None other would agree more than the Castlevania fans of this time. Some of the greatest games in the series had come out around this time. Dawn of Sorrow, the continuation of the acclaimed Aria of Sorrow, Portrait of Ruin, a continuation of Castlevania Bloodlines, one of the best classic Vanias in the series, and then the latest game, Order of Ecclesia, a continuation of nothing really. Look guys, look, a female protagonist that doesn't go against the main timeline or isn't a damsel in distress. Can we stop complaining about women now? So, considering the amount of games that we had at this point, it was in the cards for fans of the series to expect an upcoming console release. So, now we return to late 2008. And what were we given exactly? Oh! Well, something tells me this is gonna be a problem. Castlevania Judgement, a fighting game from 2008 that has our favorite cast of characters and our apparent favorite Castlevania game to shit on. Yeah, ever since its inception, it appeared as if this game was the black sheep of the family, similar to these fucks. As to why, well, it seems like there are many reasons to it. Many cite the art style, which is an odd criticism, but moving on. The next is either because the game departs very heavily from the roots of Castlevania. Others state that it may be due to the fact that the game doesn't really have much to offer in the grand scheme of things, most of which are fair criticisms. However, this game is actually a lot more better than what many would like to give it credit for. You knew this was gonna happen, didn't you? Yeah, this was to be expected. Yes, I know, this isn't the first time I had a spicy opinion on a game before, let alone it be a Castlevania one. So I'm sure you can all add it to the list of extremes that dear old Cherry has in their treasure chest. But before you start labeling me as an oddity, or whatever the hell you want to call me, allow for yourself to hear me out. I will be going over Castlevania Judgement via the category system that I have adopted from similar reviews that I've done in the past. But to give everyone a warm-up, these will be the things that I will be going over in this review. Story, gameplay, modes, characters, stages, music, visuals, and lastly, conclusion. Do keep in mind that these are my thoughts and experiences with Judgement. If any of you have differing experiences or thoughts about the game, then I'd be happy to hear it. Just keep it civil, and all will be splendid. With that disclaimer out of the way, we can finally begin with our assessment of Castlevania Judgement. Now, if you were expecting for this game to have a cohesive story, it doesn't. All for the sole reason that there is a story mode for each character, meaning that it is debatable as to what really occurred. So I'll start off by giving brief story recaps for each of the characters. Simon's story starts off where the original Castlevania game ends off, where he was apparently looking for some vampires until he blacked out and magically ended up in the time rift where he meets Aeon. Aeon welcomes him and tells him he is now trapped in a time rift. Simon tells him to make more sense because he is kind of, well, you know. Aeon tells him that in the rift, what he desires shall be true, but he would have to go through trials in order to see it completed. Without question, Simon accepts that, and his first trial begins. After that, Simon's first fight is against...
I will show you the might of House Belmont.
I may not be sure what's going on, but I'm positive I won't lose.
You can't be fucking serious, Simon. Oh! I guess you were. I mean, I'm a vampire, but even I have standards. Okay, so after that, Simon confronts his next challenger being...
Fight me as you would a grown man. I do not want your mercy.
Simon fucking Belmont, what is with you and children? After a very predictable set of circumstances, Simon soon then fights Sypha Belnades, who I will get to her predicament later.
Pardon, milady, but I will not fight a woman.
Oh, but damn children are above the bell for you, Simon! You fucking nonce! Anyway, he learns that Sypha is indeed Sypha, and the fight proceeds. After which, Simon fights a furry, fish people from Atlantis, and Motaru from Armageddon, and soon comes into contact with Grand Danasty, who recognizes Simon's whip as Trevor's whip. Yeah, this conversation really amounts to nothing, it's just them looking at each other suspiciously and then they clash. Care to guess who wins this one? So after that, Simon fights Kid Dracula, then after that he fights instant demonetization, then after all that, he finally comes into contact with Trevor, in which Simon fights him to prove that he is worthy of the whip. Plot. Did I mention that this game has plot? Upon soon finding and defeating Aeon, so that they could figure out who would be the person to go through what I like to call the Time Gate, Simon finds the Time Reaper and defeats him. Afterwards, Simon is returned back to his time in which a woman, who I'm going to presume is his wife from Haunted Castle, because I like connecting things, tells him that he is afflicted with Dracula's curse and needs to find his remains in order to purge it. Hence, Simon goes on his quest. Now we move on to Maria's story, and, well, it exists. Maria is welcomed by Aeon, and she asks what a time rift is. Aeon tells her what he told Simon, and let's just say Maria would not survive in the 1970s. Maria defeats Aeon and moves on her merry way. Somehow, after that she encounters Alucard, Simon the child abuser, and soon stumbles upon Shanoa minding her damn business. As Shanoa does, of course. Shanoa sees her and asks the most basic of questions, which causes Maria to respond with an attitude and now wants to throw hands. Maria, my Maria, in Christ, there is literally no gain or benefit to you fighting Shanoa. Oh, all she did was call you little shit! Anyway, after using the power of furry creatures, she defeats Shanoa and moves on to her next battle, which involves Eric LeShit. Some fight against the people from Atlantis, and soon comes into contact with Sypha Belnades and,
They're huge.
Yeah, folks, it doesn't get better from here. So after Maria chooses to fight Sypha for refusing her status in the Biggie Titty Committee, he wins the fight, somehow, and later fights Cornell, Golem, and,
Oh my god, vampire!
Why, hello, sweetie pie. You'll make a nice little appetizer.
I feel very uncomfortable for very obvious reasons. Then Maria says the classic line of,
Even the vampires are bigger than mine!
What are you babbling about?
you know, Carmilla, for a very suggestive vampire, I have never seen one so oblivious to on-the-nose comments. Especially coming from a vampire with history of #FreeTheNipple. After that mess, Maria meets Jesus, I mean Aeon, once more in the clock tower, supposedly being the chosen one. She seems more concerned about her wish, which apparently had something to do with her looks, because the next thing Aeon said was that appearances are useless and they fade away in quick time. Maria finally acknowledges this. Aeon explains what he previously did in the Simon story to Maria. She picks up what he's putting down, the two fight, and take a wild guess who wins here. Maria goes through the time gate and fights the Time Reaper, and guessed what? She ends up victorious over the creature. If it wasn't apparent, the Maria we follow in this game is a Maria after the events of Rondo of Blood, by a generous few months or a whole year after Dracula is defeated. So, we are a bit behind on the Symphony train. Luckily though, her ending describes the events of Symphony perfectly. Now, the line, Maria met Alucard once, either implies that upon returning back to her normal time, two scenarios occur. Either Maria recalls the events of Judgment and remembers meeting Alucard in the Time Rift, or no one remembers the events of the Time Rift and the meeting was just by coincidence. I'm going to go with the second approach because that one offers not so many problems as the first one does. Next story we have to tackle is none other than Trevor's story.
Come.
Before we may start though, the Trevor we play as is a Trevor after the events of Dracula's curse, but before any of the events of Curse of Darkness. How do I know this? I will explain at the end because that is where it is relevant. Anyway, Trevor meets Aeon and has a similar response to what everyone has had thus far. Aeon too gives a similar response to all the responses he has made thus far, so the two spar and Trevor wins, leaving him on his merry way to do what Trevor does best. Trevor soon fights Shanoa, Cornell, and soon Simon Belmont. The two of them engage in conversation, and Simon can't believe that he is standing right in front of the Trevor Belmont. Trevor finally understands what Aeon meant by Time Rift. Simon then expresses how he has always dreamt of a day where he could fight Trevor, and so they do. Afterwards, Trevor gives Simon motivational advice and moves on. After that, he soon fights Grant, a horde of zombies, and floating vampire Jesus. Trevor greets Alucard but is unsure whether they have met yet, due to, you know, time shenanigans.
What the hell is this?
Luckily for him, this is post-Symphony Alucard we are talking about here, so he expresses that it had been at least 300 years. Apparently the two of them had fought once before, and Alucard was using a fraction of his power. Okay, fucking Shaggy. So now Trevor wants him to go full Ultra Instinct on him, in order to see who is better. Alucard agrees and the two fight. After this fight, Trevor says this.
An empty victory. It is your father I am truly after.
Then why the fuck did you fight him in the first place, you fucking dickhead? After that, he fights Maria. Seriously, what is it with you Belmonts and children? Upon doing that, he fights Golem and soon finds Sypha. Trevor makes a comment about Sypha's appearance that could either get you cancelled or arrested depending on where or how you said it. Sypha seems to not recognize him. Of course, Trevor explains it to her in the most vague way possible, yet she somehow understands that Trevor is indeed a Belmont and requests a match. Trevor, being the only Belmont in this game who likes to use his hands, agrees to her request, as he himself is curious about her abilities. After that spousal abuse, Trevor finds Aeon in the clock tower. Trevor has the feeling that he isn't free from the time rift just yet, and Aeon gives a different account of what the situation is. And then people wonder why people think Aeon is full of shit. Trevor volunteers himself, but not before Aeon tells him that there's only one chance to defeat the Time Reaper. Believing that Aeon doesn't trust in his resolve, he questions whether or not he does. Aeon then battles Trevor and subsequently loses. Trevor then fights the Time Reaper and wins that, and all is returned back to normal. So, remember what I said earlier about this Trevor and where he comes from? At least in a time manner anyway. Now, the reason why I said he comes from after Dracula's curse, but before Curse of Darkness, is because of this ending. It explains that once after being returned to his timeline, he pursues a sorcerer that is as powerful as Death himself. Now, this might be a little confusing until a sentence later where it states that he soon meets two Devil Forge Masters, implying it to be Hector and Isaac. So yes, the Trevor we play as in Judgement is most definitely before Curse of Darkness, and the sorcerer that was being referred to must either be Zed or Isaac. There is no debating it. Now, with that discussed, let's talk about his wife. This intro basically goes into deeper lore into Sypha's character, as up to this point, all we knew about her was that she was the cloaked figure from Castlevania 3, and that game's ending. That's really much about it. Somehow, she's given exclusive immunity to hunt down creatures of the night, yet her sisters are not. The Orthodox Church, ladies and gentlemen. It then says that one day, while she was working, she met a stranger. I wonder who that could be. She is confronted by Aeon, who welcomes her just as he did with everyone else. Sypha is left confused, and rightfully so, but Aeon just says what he has already said already. Sypha accepts the terms and conditions to Aeon's terms of service, and the two begin the first trial. Sypha wins, and she moves on to greater pastures. After that little tango, she fights Trevor, Grant, and Cornell, who she seems to have a genuine issue with. Despite Cornell pleading with her that he isn't evil, Sypha finds every excuse in the book to demonize Cornell, simply for the fact that he is a werewolf. You know, the air is clouded by this dense fog of irony. After beating the ever-living Ansem out of Cornell,
Darkness.
she moves on to fight other beings like
Me fight to live.
Oh, so we're not going over that speech you gave to Cornell about creatures, are we? Sypha, you're a fucking hypocrite. After questioning my life after Sypha fought Golem, she fights fish people. That's it. She then finds Shanoa and, dear Christ, give me the strength to understand Sypha's nonsense. Sypha calls Shanoa a vampire, which is definitely a new one. Shanoa replies with a nothing salad, yet Sypha is so determined to believe that Shanoa is a vampire for no particular reason. She is willing to ignore whatever Shanoa might say and simply wishes to persecute her. Ironic, ain't it? So, Sypha defeats Shanoa with the word of the gospel and just flat out hypocrisy. She then fights Alucard, whatever that thing is, and lastly, woman that shall not be named. So apparently these two have beef that runs very hot, as Carmilla seems to be the reason either witches are being persecuted or the reason why people are suddenly getting the urge to persecute witches.
That is the true nature of man. We merely gave it a little nudge. Come, show me your true nature now.
God, it's like every time she speaks, it's like my ears want to file for sexual harassment. After defeating Dump in the trunk, for reasons established, she eventually meets Aeon in the clock tower. Sypha tells him that he was right, and how in defeating Carmilla she achieved a fraction of her purpose. Mr. Text-to-Speech is glad to hear that, but they aren't done, as one last trial eludes them. Aeon explains something else than what was previously stated, and this time says that there is an enemy trapping them in the time rift that must be stopped. Sypha volunteers, but once again Aeon tells her what he told Trevor in the previous story mode. Sypha is calm about the ordeal and suggests a fight between the two to see who is best suited for the task. Aeon agrees and promptly gets a stab shoved up his ass. Sypha then comes face to face with the Time Reaper and he gets a holy stick up it. Time is restored back to normal and Sypha returns to being a hunter for the church. Years later, Dracula shows up and the Orthodox Church sends Sypha to deal with it. Due to the fact that the area she is going to has a deep, and I mean deep, prejudice against witches, she enters those lands not as Sypha Belnades, but as Sypha Fernandez. Yeah, if it wasn't clear by this point, the Sypha we just played as is a Sypha years before Dracula's curse. The ending also explains why Sypha was called Sypha in the original Castlevania 3, hence now there should be no reason as to why people still believe Sypha was originally a dude. Right? Moving on from that, now we have to deal with Renard LeCarde.
So, who am I fighting?
Now, before we move on through the story, allow me to get something off my chest.
Why? 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 Why, oh god fucking why?
We start out with the explanation of the vampire killer being given to the Morris clan, and with that, Alucard makes a spear and chooses to give it to the LeCarde family. It then explains why the spear was made, as it was made to be a yin to the vampire killer's yang. It then explains how Eric grows tired of being the heir to the Alucard spear. He then one day left home and then ended up in the Time Rift. Our friendly neighborhood Aeon is, of course, there to greet him. Eric looks at Aeon and replies in the same manner that someone who is 100% confused but wants to act cool would respond. Aeon says his usual desire shtick, and Eric immediately thinks he's the hot shit. Eric and Aeon fight, and soon Eric goes on his merry way. After that, Eric fights a heretic, a please get away from me, and then he comes into contact with the creator of the lands, Mr. Card. The man asks Eric if he is a LeCarde, as he recognizes the spear. Eric then looks at Alucard as if he is a god for a minute. Alucard then asks him about the Morris family, and it was only after that did the hot shit essence start to form. Eric told him that as long as he has the spear, the whip ain't shit. Okay, dumbass, let's see how that line of thinking would get you. Anyway, Alucard tells him that the lance is meant to be the yin to the whip's yang, but Eric says bet, and the two exchange hands, or rather blades in this case. After defeating Mr. Card, Eric moves on and encounters Emo Legacy, the reused troop, and Trevor Bellpatch. The whole gist of the conversation simply revolves around Eric thinking that Trevor's better than him because he's older, and totally not because the guy was the first in history to defeat Dracula. No, it's totally because the guy has an eye patch.
Charming. Seems you could use a little lesson on manners.
Oh, thank God, at least someone is gonna teach this little shit. Apparently his father sure as hell wasn't gonna do it. After rightfully getting his ass handed,
Just kidding.
Eric wins and continues through the Time Rift. He then comes into conflict with a mummy, the concept of abuse being given form, and
Wow, a huge lance!
we're going to hell. Eric finds Maria and begins to obsess over her like she's a damn idol. Care to guess why that may be? Maria gets weirdo vibes from Eric, but that doesn't stop Eric from asking her to fight. Children, am I right? So after that bloody confrontation, Eric is once again at the feet of our wonderful savior, Aeon. Prickly LeCrab tells Aeon that he is done with whatever he wanted to do and wants out. Aeon tells the child that he is held captive by an entity. Prick says something snarky, and it leads Aeon to tell him that they can now open the time gate, but they must decide as to who must go through.
But we must decide who will fight him.
Then there's no problem. I will go.
Aeon tells them that what he has probably told everyone else, and Prick assumes rightfully that Aeon doesn't believe in him. So his hot shit senses tingle and persuades him to engage in combat. Through the powers of gravitational nonsense, Prick goes through the time gate and fights Professor Reused Assets and comes out victorious. In Eric's ending, like most people, it takes a severe tragedy in his life. That tragedy being his soulmate being turned into a vampire by Elizabeth Bartley. For him to actually realize, oh shit, perhaps what everyone said about the spear was true. It then states what we already knew from Castlevania Bloodlines. If any of you have played Portrait of Ruin, then this following paragraph would be of interest to you. It basically foreshadows what was explained in that game about the Morris family's use of the whip, ending this story. Next in line is none other than Shanoa.
My duty.
Her story begins with the start of Order of Ecclesia, and it states that right after she's sent by the Order to find this traitor, a man appears ahead of her. Who is this man? Why, it's Aeon, of course. It couldn't be anyone else. Shanoa asks where she is, because she is a woman with agency.
This is an alternate universe. You must pass a series of trials in order to gain passage out.
Excuse me, what is this?
This is an alternate universe.
Remind me again what you said to everyone else?
This is where you'll find what you desire. But first, there are many trials you must pass. This is where you'll find what you desire. But first, there are many trials you must pass. This is a place where you may touch that which you desire most. Yet, there are trials you must pass. This is where you'll find what you desire. But first, there are many trials you must pass.
Aeon, hun, why are you like this? Shanoa fights Aeon to gain passage through the realm, as she really doesn't have a choice in this matter. The two spar, Shanoa wins, and she moves on her merry way. After that, Shanoa fights a dick, a witch, and the ancient pharaoh. I'm about to come. Shanoa takes notice of his speed, and the pharaoh replies with what many would call a half-truth. Upon hearing this, Shanoa requests a match with the pharaoh. He then tries to course correct and says that he didn't do it alone and had help from Mr. Bellpatch. Shanoa doesn't give a flying shit and chooses to fight him anyway, to measure her strength. After delivering the sickest burn of mankind, Shanoa fights Xemnas, the Gilman from the Black Lagoon, and... oh my god, it's her again. From the looks of it, she's still pissed at the comment referring to her as little. Similar to Grant before her, she tells Shanoa that she beat Dracula with Richter, which is already a qualification to beat the ever-living Christ out of her. Don't worry, Shanoa, you are doing God's work. After beating the shit out of Misa Amane from Death Note, she soon finds Alucard, Yar the Pirate Stripper, and... oh, it's Simon Bell Abuser! Shanoa mentions his whip and how he is from the Lost Clan of Vampire Hunters. Simon asks what she meant by lost, and she answers by telling him that his clan is completely went father mode and went looking for the milk, and their disappearance is the reason why the Order exists. Simon shows interest in her, and by her I mean her power specifically, so the two spar and Shanoa comes out on top. After defeating Simon, she meets once more with Father Time. After a strangely put together conversation between the two, Aeon tells Shanoa that they must defeat a visitor 10,000 years from the future. Shanoa provides her help in defeating him, but Aeon stops her and tells her that they only have one chance to defeat this visitor. Shanoa believes that she is being tried and tested, and she chooses to show Aeon that she is worthy of taking his final challenge. After burning Aeon into a fine steak, Shanoa passes into the time gate, challenges and defeats the Time Reaper, and returns back to her time. In case you're wondering if this ending spoils anything from Order of Ecclesia, well, not only are you a decade late, but no, it doesn't spoil anything. All it spoils is the name of the supposed traitor and why he was labeled that. But that is the prologue of Order of Ecclesia knowledge, so I wouldn't get my pansies too much in a twist. And if you are, well then you better be ready to catch these vampiric hands, you fucking mortal. Lastly, we have the one and only... oh my god, what the fuck happened to you, Danasty? His story begins with a brief recap of his version of events from Dracula's curse. Despite this explanation going against any pre-established canon, but whatever. After that paragraph, it tells us that Grant had dedicated himself to rebuilding Wallachia after such travesty bestowed upon it. You know, I have the perfect joke for this, but it will most likely get me some unwanted attention. So I'm just going to show this image of a dog in a cosplay so you can figure out what the joke was. And if you have figured it out, congratulations, you have a sense of humor. A year after the events of Dracula's defeat, Grant wakes up from an acid trip and finds himself in a place that most people find themselves in after such an event. Florida. Aeon says hi, Grant says ha, which leads Aeon to go on with his desire spiel, and Grant replies with epic, and the two engage in some combat. The man who makes me question executive decisions wins, and he moves on to his next bout. Grant is face to face with Saberwolf, woman, and then a walking talking wall.
Fine with me. Hey, big man. Ever been in love?
Grant, where are you going with this?
Love? What love? Love tasty?
Love ain't a snack, genius. Here, why don't I show you? Come on.
You know what? Who needs eyes anyway?
Oh, Cereza, you're not gonna believe this. Guess who just showed up? Isaac LaForez.
Oh, for fuck's sake! After spreading his seedlings all upon Golem, he reveals that war was what he was talking about. You know, you could have said that from the get-go, but thanks for the permanent visual damage. Grant moves on from that love quarrel onto another with Shimon, Gayfish, cunt. As I stated before, Sypha's from a time before she met any of the Dracula's curse gang. So, like with Trevor, she doesn't remember Grant. He realizes this, but Sypha takes it to that he is simply just mumbling to himself. So, she asks again, who is he? The next line Grant says is by far one of his funniest lines that doesn't rely on pure absurdity.
Alright, you ready for this? I'm your future husband.
Don't be ridiculous. I'll see you prove it then.
Sypha, how on God's green earth do you prove something like that? Anyway, her idea of proving it is a fight to the near death, and upon Grant winning by turning Sypha into a human dartboard, he solemnly admits that he shouldn't have lied. After that, Grant comes into contact with Senor Palecheeks, cute as nails but annoying as nails on a chalkboard, and Jotaro Kujo, if he was obsessed with fucking belts. Supposedly, Grant was originally invited to Trevor and Sypha's wedding, but Grant had chosen not to go due to the fact that he had feelings for Sypha, and to see her gone to a friend just stung a lot. Trevor took it as him saying that he wasn't worthy of Sypha, but he himself was. So he challenges Grant in order to prove that he was better suited for her. Upon the two of each other beating up one another for the love and affection of a cardboard cutout,
I hope you make Sypha happy. I truly mean that. Finally.
I know this is saying a lot, but I think Grant is by far the best character when it comes down to plot development. We now see the Lord and Savior once again. Grant professes that after getting fucked harder than Eric Cartman trying to get an iPad, Aeon tells him that with time, all wounds heal. Well, thank you, school nurse. But right now that doesn't matter, because the time gate is going to open soon. Grant is understanding and asks what he can do for him. Aeon doesn't answer that question, but chooses to throw out a statement that was just implied previously. Grant responds in the realest way possible, and only then does Aeon explain the whole dilemma thing, and how only one person can enter through the time gate. Grant comes back around with the realism, and the two fight like two British people in an alleyway. Grant is victorious and goes off to find the Time Furry and wins over the damned creature. Grant's ending is simply more of his intro, and to be quite honest with you, it's one of the more wholesome endings here. It's one of the few times where the music and what I'm reading actually pair well together. Alright, now that all the Warriors of Light stories have been wrapped up, we can now move on to the characters that actually fucking matter. Starting us off with the emo boy himself, Alucard. Our story starts off basically with what we already know, as the story likes to recap basically what Alucard's role is in the story, essentially stating that although, despite being the son of Dracula, he has been going against his father's wishes for, I don't know, how many fucking hundreds of years has it been already? It also states, by the end of it, that Alucard was one day travelling amongst himself when he felt a strange essence, and how he met a man that existed yet also didn't. Please give it a welcome for Schrodinger's man, Alucard meets Aeon and proceeds to ask him if he is a time traveler, and if he is, to what extent can he travel. Aeon explains that they are in another world, where the impossible is possible. Yeah, you know where else that fucking slogan was used? The Make-A-Wish Foundation. However, Aeon tells Alucard that there are trials that he has to go through.
I see. So that is the key to ending this farce.
You see what? Regardless though, the two square, and Alucard ends up victorious in this bout. He then proceeds to fight Cyclops, a woman that despite knowing ice bolts needs to chill the fuck out, and
Dracula's plaything.
My, what a dirty mouth you have. We vampires should be friends.
oh my fucking god. So Alucard comes into contact with Carmilla, but if you ask me, her name should be fucking Succubus, cause my god is she horny.
Come.
Carmilla basically tries to make a proposition that since they're both vampires, even though Alucard's not, that they should be friends and live in a world of happiness and friendship is magic and whatever fucking nonsense you want to throw out the window. Alucard declines and says that no matter what, he will never join the likes of his father or any other vampire. Carmilla, confused, tells him that, you know, despite having Dracula's blood, he still goes against her. Alucard decides to cut it short and say, shut up, die. And Carmilla is so offended by Alucard stating this that she makes a sexual innuendo. Again, after the fight and banishing Carmilla back to the halls of the Biggie Titty Committee's office, Alucard comes into contact with the Demon of Entitlement, the demented version of my search history, and Jack Skellington, who makes his first appearance in this story, after not appearing at all in any of the Warriors of Light stories. But to cut this conversation short, it's really just a homage to when Death and Alucard first spoke in Symphony of the Night, when Death was trying to convince Alucard into joining his father. But since Alucard's skull is made out of the same concrete that builds up the damn castle, he refuses, like how he did in Symphony, which leads Death to get very fucking pissed, and the two decides to exchange blades. Oh, and before I may continue, he also states that no one has ever fought Dracula at his full power, which is bullshit, by the way. Because the only game where Dracula has ever at all have been at full power was in Dracula's Curse. It has literally been stated multiple times that that game, Dracula was at full power. How do you mean to tell me that Dracula wasn't even at full power at the time? How? It's not like beforehand he was killed by a Belmont because the last Belmont Dracula came into contact with was Leon. Did something happen off screen that I don't know about? Was there a secret event that all of us were just blind to? Oh, and that's not mentioning the fact that Dracula was supposedly at his full power during the Demon Castle War. I don't know where this version of Alucard comes from, but I know damn well this happens after Symphony of the Night. I just don't know if it happens at any other point. But point being, I highly doubt that Dracula was not at full power, at least once. Now, sure, he said single combat. However, the problem is that you can apply that same logic to Trevor Belmont, because there was an ending, and keep in mind, if Judgement takes place in an alternate universe, as Aeon once said, then it's possible that these different characters not only come from different times, but they can also come from different universes. So let's keep that in mind. It's possible that Trevor was by himself was able to kill Dracula without issue. Do not fucking tell me that there was a singular person in history who has not been able to defeat Dracula at his full power by himself. Do not even lie to me. Regardless of that though, the tangent is now over and we can finally continue on with the story. So after Alucard turned Death into a plate of nothing but the bones of hot buffalo wings, he crosses paths with Amnesia, hashtag Red Hair Simon Forever, and finally the first introduction to the man, the myth, the legend, Dracula himself.
This will mark the first time I face you at your full strength.
I just got done explaining as to why that's bullshit, I'm not going to explain it again. So Alucard tells Dracula that when he first fought him, he was afraid, because the idea of fighting and or killing his father frightened him. Okay, coward. So Dracula does what Dracula does and pulls a Shao Kahn and begins to mock the poor boy. Alucard then tells him in return that the son will surpass the father. God, this man really thinks he's Jesus.
Very well, child. Come.
Please don't. So after that long struggle, Alucard comes out victorious over his father and proceeds to move on, in which he comes into contact with Aeon again. He begins by saying the same thing that we've already seen him say 1,000 times over. Alucard, being the big brain genius that he is, comes to the conclusion that everything up until now had been up to Aeon's doing. So, Aeon tells him that he is correct, however there is just one last thing that they had to cover. Alucard said something here that's very interesting, but I'm not going to cover it until the end portion. So, Aeon informs Alucard about the visitor from 10,000 years into the future, and how the time gate can only allow one person entry in order to defeat him.
Ah, you catch on quick.
Apparently so, Aeon. Apparently he does. Upon reducing Aeon to nothing but cinders, he walks through the time gate and proceeds to fight the Time Reaper, and after spamming Soul Steal like an absolute bitch, he defeats him and all is returned back to where it should be. In his ending, it states that he continues to try and look for ways in order to defeat Dracula, and it mentions the 1999 Demon Castle War as I described earlier. However, what it also goes into is that apparently, with the end of one prophecy, begins the birth of a new one. And now, we have to deal with the prophecy of a castle being brought on by a solar eclipse in the year 2035. So what does Alucard think it's sensible? Infiltrate the Japanese government in order to get what he wants. But, I will be fair, I would infiltrate the Japanese government, but for a whole completely different reason. I'm surprised he hasn't filed for a restraining order on me yet. Next in line is LeCarde, Cornell.
Let's go. Feel the emptiness.
Basically, his introduction states that he is a part of a tribe, and basically that tribe got an ancient curse bestowed upon them that turned everyone into a werewolf. However, he, being the Blue Crescent Moon, is the only person who can actually transform at will. However, he also states that one day his power ran amok, and when he actually came to, he saw a man, whom many refer to as Aeon, but me personally I like to call him Jesus. Aeon welcomes the wolf, but Cornell is already filled with so many damn questions. His first question is, since he is in a time rift, does that possibly mean that he is now permanently a werewolf within the time rift? Aeon says yes, but never provides any explanation, but he does say that the answer to cure his infliction is in the time rift. Aeon, no offense, but it's like telling someone they have cancer, not telling them how they got it, but don't worry, there's a cure here somewhere. I'm not gonna tell you where it is, cause that'd be too simple, but it's somewhere. After that, Cornell wishes to be released, like a fucking pet dog, and then the two start catfighting. Don't mess with me! After Cornell beats the ever-living shit out of Aeon, he moves on to fight the Hunchback of Notre Dame, a poacher, and...
Those garments. Are you clergy?
That's no business of yours, beast.
Oh. Well, Cornell, it seems like you're gonna be in for a rough one. Ah, kill me. Cornell then asks Sypha if she's a part of the clergy, because, you know... Well, look at her. Sypha then responds back to Cornell as if he was a... You know, I'm not gonna make that comparison, I think we're just gonna move on. Desperate for a solution, Cornell asks Sypha if her holy arts can cure his curse of darkness. Sypha tells Cornell that his curse has been around since ancient times, and her prescription is death. You know, you could have just said, I fucking hate you. Cornell looks at her prescription and says, fuck that, and the two begin to brawl. Cornell wins, and upon doing so, he begins to question his life.
Why is it that you loathe us who teeter on the edge of nothing?
Afterwards, he fights LeCarde, Maximus Decimus Meridius, and...
What have we here? A little doggy who seems to have slipped his leash.
For crying out fucking loud, why do you show up as often as you do? After making my ears very uncomfortable, Cornell tells Carmilla to fucking leave, as he's really not having any of her bullshit right now. However, Carmilla then tells Cornell that she heard a little something from death about his little affliction. Cornell is surprised by this and seemingly wants an answer. However, Carmilla replies with this.
If you want a treat, you have to obey. So be a good doggy and play dead.
After never wanting to hear the word obey ever again, the two of them fight and Cornell, thank God, beats the ever-living crap out of her. In which, upon doing so, he moves on to greater pastures. The next opponent he faces is Dementia. The next opponent he faces is Dementia. The next opponent he faces is Dementia, a child that's on my top 10 most wanted list. After those confrontations, Cornell eventually finds Death somewhere and is able to ask him about his curse. Death delivers probably the only good news that Cornell has heard in a while.
Truly? You swear it?
What would I gain with a lie?
A lot, actually. So although Cornell believes in what Death says, he doesn't believe in Death himself. So the two fight, and after Cornell becomes victorious, he chooses to find his cure in some other fashion. God, this is like destroying the cure for cancer because you believe in ulterior medicine. Hashtag Cornell is an anti-vaxxer. Speaking of cures, he gains at least a little bit of new hope after defeating Death, and later on he comes into contact with Aeon. Cornell tells Aeon that although he was able to find part of his answer, he didn't find his cure. Aeon tells him that with time, the cure to his affliction will come. But their priority right now is that Cornell needs to escape. Cornell agrees because apparently him being in furry form for too long starts to turn him into a degenerate. Aeon then says something I've never seen him say to anyone else, and it's never brought up ever again. However, Cornell understands what Aeon is trying to tell him, and believes that his opponent is standing right in front of him. Aeon admits to this, and also says that the door only allows one person per entry. Cornell then readies his stance, and Aeon prepares as well, and then the two engage. After shoving Aeon down the clock tower, Cornell enters through the time gate and prepares to fight the Time Reaper. After absolutely dominating him, he manages to mend the fabric of time and returns back to his era, which apparently takes place before the events of Castlevania 64, because he simply returns back to everything as normal, except now in a more depressed mood. He returns back to his village to see that its entirety in flames, and his sister Ada is being taken away. So, that gives him his motivation to start his journey, in which is depicted in Legacy of Darkness. Can I please just skip this one? Well, unfortunately for you, Cereza, I don't think you can skip this one. Besides, it's just Carmilla. I don't see the issue here. No, it's Carmilla, but it's not just Carmilla. It's the most sexually perverse Carmilla I've ever seen in my entire life. Okay, now I just think you're over-exaggerating it a bit. Oh, the great Soma Cruz does not believe me? Alright, then take a look for yourself then. Okay, fine, maybe I will.
Come.
Oh.
Play with me.
Oh. You're still doing it. Why do I still have to do it? Well, for starters, it'd be super weird if out of all the characters you chose to skip, it'd be one single character. And besides, remember that thing you did to me when you invited me into your room the other day? Yeah, I'm still not happy about it. Oh, you asshole. Don't worry. I'll get you back for this eventually. Yep, I'm sure you will. Alright. Carmilla's story begins where she randomly just wakes up one day, as considering how vampires tend to work in this series, and considering the vampires that are attributed to Dracula, chances are she woke up around the same time Dracula did. And the first thing she chooses to do is try and figure out if, in any way, she can aid her master. But before she does, she needs to find someone to sink her freaking perverse teeth into. Luckily for us though, she comes across Aeon. Aeon tells Carmilla that there is a rift in time, and, being the curious vampire that she is, she continues to ask about this rift. Basically, he tells her what he has probably told everyone else, and that whatever she desires can be found within the time rift.
Why not? You'll let me have my fun now, won't you?
Carmilla, please stop talking. After Aeon is sadly beaten and brutalized by Carmilla,
Let's dance.
she moves on to her next opponent.
Don't worry, you'll come to enjoy this.
Oh, trust me, I will not be liking this anytime soon. Carmilla soon comes into confrontation with the character that for some reason has Moonfight as their theme, Trevor Belmont.
Creature of the night, you will not escape the grasp of my whip.
Believe me, Trevor, whatever you think the whip is gonna do to her, you're probably not gonna like the result. And sooner or later, Mr. Hot Topic. This conversation really amounts to just the two of them asking each other why one has to go against Dracula and the other one is for Dracula. You can guess which character is on each position. After succumbing Alucard to her fun and games, and after really not ever wanting to hear the word wet again,
P-word.
Carmilla then fights Simon, a Spartan after consuming 1 ounce of G-Fuel, and Lady Darkness. Essentially what this conversation amounts to is that Carmilla finds out that Shanoa is using dark energies as her power, meaning the same dark energies that should belong to creatures of the night, like herself and Dracula. Shanoa then tells Carmilla that it's that power that will kill both her and her master. Carmilla gets pissy and she tells Shanoa that her power should not be trifled with by the likes of humans. After that brutal bout, and a soft confirmation that Carmilla would practically fuck anything that has a fucking pulse, Carmilla moves on to fight her bestie, someone please call 911 right now, and Mr. Native. Carmilla appears in front of Cornell and calls him by his Xbox gamer tag, in which Cornell's attention is immediately grasped.
How long has it been since I abandoned that name?
As he begins to wonder why Carmilla's here, and tells her that if she is here to try and convince Cornell to join the vampires, then she is surely mistaken. Carmilla then replies saying that Dracula might have need of you, but I certainly do not. Then Cornell asks what is she doing here, and then Carmilla proceeds to yell insults at him because why the fuck not. After using her special techniques, Carmilla wins and soon finds herself in the clock tower in front of Aeon. Carmilla confesses that although she hasn't filled her appetite for whatever it is exactly that she was looking for, she is practically bored and wants out. I wonder who else acted like this. Aeon then tells her that they are imprisoned by a common foe, and escaping this place will not be easy. Carmilla, misunderstanding what he's saying, thinks that he is offering his bodyguard services and asks Aeon to escort her out. Aeon then tells Carmilla that when all the soul keys were collected, it would allow for the time gate to be opened. Carmilla, impatient as ever, tells Aeon to open it. However, he then tells what he has told everyone else thus far, and that it can only allow one person at a time to go through. Carmilla, not having it, chooses to want to fight. And, luckily for her, Aeon is willing to bout as well. Aeon loses due to the power of lacking foresight, and Carmilla is able to walk through the time gate.
An amusing toy until I broke it.
Okay, I'll admit that line was pretty funny. So anyway, Carmilla goes to the time gate, encounters the Time Reaper, fucks it to ever-living death, and returns time to back whence it was. Her ending basically details about her life cycle as well as Dracula's, how throughout the centuries she will be slain again and again and again, but would also come back again and again and again. This cycle of torment makes anyone surprised that she is still loyal to Dracula, yet she still humbly is. And her ending implies that perhaps her loyalty runs deeper than her appearances. Whatever the fuck that means. Oh, you're expecting me to cover Golem story now? You're funny. The reason why I'm not going to go over Golem story is because if you've ever searched the word pointless in the Urban Dictionary, you would find a picture of Castlevania Judgment's Golem right next to it. Trying to explain the entire story would just be me saying, oh, a child wants to learn why it was born. That's precisely the entirety of Golem story. So instead, what I'm going to do is skip this story and move on to the next one like Golem's story never actually fucking happened. But actually, now that I think about it, there is one thing I need to do.
So chat, listen to this story I have for you. So I was sitting on my throne room one day, and then I was just waiting for that Belmont to come in.
Eventually he did, and then he was starting this whole speech about how I'm a monster and how mankind ill needs a savior such as me. But then I look back at him. I throw my wine glass onto the floor and I say, "What is a man but a miserable pile of secrets?" I recall those days like they were yesterday. Oh, do I miss them though. Wait a minute. That's my fucking location!
Alright, after thanking God for the 1000th time after moving on from that last section, we can now move on to Death.
Who is foolish enough to challenge me?
So basically, Death's introduction basically goes like this. It basically starts off with a brief introduction as to Death and Dracula's relationship. It also states that Death has been sowing the hearts of man with wickedness and trying to get Dracula resurrected as soon as possible. However, one day he just finds himself in the Time Rift where he finds Jesus. Death immediately recognizes Aeon as a time traveler, something that I can hardly say any of the other roster of characters were able to deduce. Aeon sees that Death is quite the perceptive individual, and that in order to save this collapsing timeline, supposedly, they need to get the soul keys, which can only be gained through combat. Death responds to him by saying that whatever will aid in his master's resurrection, he will gladly do it. The two of them squabble and Death comes out victorious, in which he goes on to fight other beings like... Oh, for the love of God, can you please leave me the fuck alone? He also encounters Golem, and sooner or later he also encounters Cornell, which Cornell gets the same impression that Death is trying to convince him to join Dracula. However, what Cornell does not know is that Death doesn't give two shits anymore, and frankly just wants to see this fucking furry dead. After Cornell's defeated, Death chooses to drop one of the sickest quotes and proceeds to move on, in which he is confronted by LeCarde, I'm running out of jokes for these people, and the man of the hour, Simon Belmont. And for some odd reason, Death sounds like a child who got robbed of the opportunity of getting a fucking iPad for Christmas from his mum. Just take a listen.
Why would I seek escape? This is what I want.
You believe you can defeat me?
You will learn to fear the power of the Undying.
Death then defeats Simon for pulling a Sigma male face during the conversation they just had, and he proceeds to move on. He then soon encounters Hypocrite, twat I haven't seen in a while, and... it's Mr. Card! Again. Yeah, out of all the conversations that parallels one of the games, I'd argue that this one kind of does the most, considering that it's Death and Alucard talking as if this was just Symphony of the Night replaying itself. However, Death has an important date with Father Time and chooses to throw Alucard overboard and feeds it to the damn Kraken, which then allows Death to go to the Clock Tower and meet with Aeon. Death tells him that everything that he said from the beginning should now be in place, and Aeon thanks him for the fact that now everything is as he desired. Death then asks Aeon who dare would challenge his lord, which then Aeon replies very vaguely, saying that it is a messenger from 10,000 years from the future, who seeks the throne of Dracula himself. Death then makes a call to action, but Aeon then once again reminds him that the time gate can only allow one person at a time to go through. Death does not see any dilemma to this whatsoever, and says that if he has to go through Aeon in order to go through, then he will do exactly that.
I see no dilemma. I will go through you if need be.
That is my desire.
Aeon, why do you never understand the gravity of these situations? So the two fight, and Death proceeds to win without much effort. He then goes to the Time Gate and fights the Time Reaper, in which he says this.
I come from 10,000 years hence. Even your visage mocks me. Die.
You know, perhaps his visage is a mockery to you because it's literally fucking you! So, Death is able to defeat the Time Reaper and all is restored back to normal. Death's ending just states that since he isn't constrained by mortality or anything like that, he continuously just keeps trying to resurrect his master. However, it also poses the question as to why such a being like Death, who himself has stated that he is a god, is serving someone like Dracula, and poses the question that perhaps there's something else going on at play. If you ask me, it probably has something to do with the Crimson Stone, but that's just a guess. Alright, we are nearing the end. I can almost taste the end of the tunnel. But now we can go through Dracula's story.
No.
Now, for this I'll be very brief and simply state that his introduction is basically sucking him off, as it's literally just a recounting of Dracula's basic history and how he became, well, Dracula. So, Aeon and him start talking, and Dracula then asks Aeon why the hell is he doing here, and why is he in the Time Rift. Aeon then tells him that there is someone who wishes to see him dead from 10,000 years in the future. Dracula laughs it off and thinks he's playing stupid, and then the two proceed to fight each other. After defeating Aeon with something that I like to call Rugal syndrome, he moves on to fight a furry, a mummy, an atrocity, oh my.
It's you, insufferable little wretch.
Oh my god, Dracula, we can finally have something we agree on. Problem 1, I probably wouldn't state that I would do a live abortion on, I don't know, a fucking 7 to 12-year-old. After that bloody bonanza, we move on to fight, oh fuck me, annoying-ass enemies that don't understand how hit detection works, and Simon Belmont. The two exchange words, and actually this is one of the few conversations that I think is pretty well written, as it's a nice nod back to Simon's quest, as Dracula tells him, why wait for the curse to kill you, when I can just do it myself? And so he does! Dracula beats the ever-living shit out of Simon, and proceeds to move on with his day like nothing ever happened. Dracula then proceeds to fight Bitch, the anti-bitch, and married to a bitch. Basically, the conversation between the two is just the two of them talking smack before they actually get at each other's throats, as seen with this dialogue where Dracula says he'll finally take revenge after his loss against Trevor.
The first man to destroy me. At last, sweet vengeance. I will savor this.
As I will savor this chance to repay you for my scars.
Come then. What a suitable finale this will make.
Epic callback. But after Trevor is swiftly defeated, with once again, Rugal syndrome, he moves on to the clock tower and meets Aeon there. Dracula, being a man of agency and one with little to no patience, tells Aeon that he's sick of his shit and wants to know if everything is alright now. Aeon tells him no, not exactly, as there's still one person he has to defeat, and that being the Time Reaper, and the fact that he comes from 10,000 years in the future. Dracula, with an actual sound argument, tells Aeon that he's not worried about an opponent that literally had to use time travel in order to defeat him. So, Dracula tries to go through, but Aeon tells him that Time Gate can only allow one person at a time. So, in order to see if Dracula is the right person to defeat the Time Reaper, the two challenge each other, and Aeon admits to Dracula that taking him down will not be so easy. And right he was, because his fight was an actual piece of shit. So after Dracula finally defeats Aeon, he moves on to defeat the Time Reaper, and time is mended back to normal. Dracula's ending is more so a philosophical idea, or more so a technicality, rather than anything substantial. Instead of saying that it was the Time Reaper that was posing a threat to humanity, it was humanity itself and its yearn to resurrect dark creatures, or creatures of the night, like Dracula, that constantly put it in jeopardy over and over again. And it is up for humanity to decide whether they make their own salvation, or they plan their own ruin. Alright, we have finally made it to the final character's story. That being Aeon's.
Who is my opponent?
Luckily though, I won't have to go over much, considering it's basically just a boss rush of all the characters in the entire game, with some special lines of dialogue here and there to spice things up. But I will go over the intro and I will go over the outro. So, his introduction basically states that he enlists the souls of 13 fighters from across different eras and times of history, in which we get introduced to the first cutscene where we see Aeon communicating with Simon, which possibly means that this is the end of Simon's story, and we are just looking at it from Aeon's perspective. After defeating Simon, he wanders about and soon comes into contact with Carmilla, Sypha, and Shanoa, in which all of them are swiftly defeated, meaning that none of them end up being the Chosen One. Afterwards, he also meets up with Death. A special cutscene plays out where Aeon states that he finally arrives and that he must be the Chosen One in order to defeat the Time Reaper. Death says the exact same thing that he said during his story mode, which you can clearly see that they already have begun using voice lines again, that isn't Aeon, and the two fight. However, Death loses, so that means he himself is also not the Chosen One. So Aeon continues to look for who may potentially be able to defeat the Time Reaper. After Death's defeat, Aeon comes into contact with Golem, Maria, Eric, Alucard, Trevor, Cornell, Grant, and eventually he meets up with Dracula. The two exchange some small banter before the two eventually fight. However, as mighty as Dracula was, he was no match for the Timekeeper himself, which then allows Aeon to move on through the Time Gate for he himself to defeat the Time Reaper. The final showdown commences, and, like with all tales ring true, Aeon is victorious. And time returns back to its peaceful state as it was before. Aeon's ending basically states that since he has no actual era that he belongs in to return to, he basically just watches over different eras of time and just writes shit down, I guess. However, his final paragraph states that we will never know his true origin or his true story, as that will remain a mystery for ever time to tell. By this point, you're probably wondering which story I believe is canon or not. And I'll be honest, the easy answer is to probably just say that Aeon's is canon and just move on. However, not quite. Because you see, every character's ending is technically canon. However, what's not canon is which character actually ended up fighting the Time Reaper. Now, if you wanted a list of the characters that I had thought had a chance of fighting the Time Reaper, here is a list of those characters from 100% down to 0%. At 100%, we have the character of Aeon, which is practically the only character in this game that I really think had a 100% chance of actually fighting the Time Reaper. I mean, for fuck's sake, even if he were to beat the Time Reaper and win, there would be no negative repercussion of him doing so. Now, at the 80% margin, we have Cornell, Alucard, Simon, and Shanoa. Most of these characters are probably only here because of the fact that they're overpowered as shit, and considering that they're mostly Castlevania staples. I'm talking about you, Alucard and Simon. However, in the case of Shanoa, I also think she has the possibility of getting at that 80%, because every time she speaks to Aeon, it's always a different conversation compared to all the other characters in the game. As well as the fact that Castlevania Judgement didn't release all too far away from Order of Ecclesia, hence was trying to tie into that game specifically, so it wouldn't surprise me that this game would give some form of leeway to someone like Shanoa. As for Cornell, it's kind of the same thing really, where Cornell has different dialogue options when speaking with Aeon compared to everyone else, and considering how powerful this guy is during combat, it wouldn't surprise me at all to know that this man was the man to fight the Time Reaper and defeat him. Then at 60% we only have Trevor, and I'll be honest, as powerful as Trevor is, I don't see him getting as much favoritism as Simon would. Don't get me wrong, 60% is still good, but it's not as good as 80. Then below that we have the 40% margin with Danasty and Sypha Belnades. And just because they're a part of the original Dracula's Curse gang does not give them any favors. Sure, Grant is fast and all, but he's not all that powerful. And considering Sypha's powerful with magic, she's just not very bright. So considering the fact that these two might have been defeated by the opponents listed beforehand, it wouldn't surprise me at all. However, there's still a chance there. Then at 20% we have the fucking children, and I'm gonna be honest, there's no way in shit that these fucking children actually beat the Time Reaper. There's absolutely hardly a slim of a chance that they did. They probably lost to other competent fighters along the way. Then at the 0% margin we have literally everyone else. I'm not saying that these characters couldn't defeat the Time Reaper, I definitely think that they could, but if they did, don't you think that there would be more timeline repercussions rather than just them beating the Time Reaper? Like, for example, if Dracula were to defeat the Time Reaper, don't you think he would have done something more nefarious than what the Time Reaper was doing to the timeline? Yeah, I thought as much. Death would probably do the same thing. Carmilla, even worse. Golem is the only character where if he were to able to defeat the Time Reaper, he would basically just go back to being a mindless brute. So essentially, nothing of essence would have happened. So technically, Golem would have gone out of that fight not as the same Golem that we had during the game's story. But then there's also the conversation as to what confrontations were canon. And, to make it simpler upon myself, I will say that every other non-cutscene interaction between the characters is non-canon. I'll give slight leeway to the conversations that have different dialogue. However, if I had to say the same thing in regards to this as I did to the likelihood of each of the characters defeating the Time Reaper, I would say about the characters giving special interaction dialogue between each other, like a 20% chance of them actually being canon. Now, the 40 to 60% that I believe is canon is the cutscenes. Now, there are certain cutscenes within the story modes between certain characters at certain points. As to when each of these cutscenes happened, that's kind of an issue that I don't think we'll ever solve. However, basically just understand that these cutscenes have a more likelihood of actually happening. However, the cutscenes at 80 to 100%-ish are the cutscenes that repeat themselves. So for example, if Cornell, for example, were to meet Carmilla in his story mode, and they had a cutscene together, then that's already fitting the 40 to 60%. However, if Carmilla's story mode already had a cutscene of her and Cornell meeting, then that bumps it up to an 80 and 100%, as the likelihood of the same two characters meeting again within a story mode is unlikely. So, having multiple interactions with certain characters within the story gives more credence to the fact that this interaction must have been canon or happened at some point. Hence, why characters who talk to each other twice, not exactly at the same time, but perhaps the same conversation just from a different perspective, may have actually happened. In order to help with what I'm saying, allow me to show a list over here as to the character interactions that I was able to find that have appeared twice. But with speculation over, allow me to give my thoughts on the story mode. It's serviceable.
And yet?
It's nothing mind-blowing by any means. In fact, I think at times it's pretty lazy. However, there are just some character interactions and some quotes from these characters that I would have never seen otherwise if I had never played the story mode. Like Grant's comments to Sypha about him being his wife, some of the comments of Carmilla that I'm always going to be scarred by, and then every time Cornell talks, I'm always thinking of Kingdom Hearts. So, I don't think there's absolutely nothing that the story mode offers. In fact, you are going to have to play every character's story mode at least twice in order to get the true endings of each of the characters. However, as much substance as I think there is, it's kind of really bland, all things considered. So, if you are to play Judgement, you're practically only playing Judgement for the story mode, and practically that's everything, really. Alright, now let's talk about something that isn't the story mode for a change, and that's actually the gameplay of Castlevania Judgement. Now, my time with the gameplay is pretty expansive considering the amount of modes and other things that I had to play within this game, so I think by this point I have a good grasp of the gameplay at this point. This game relies on, of course, the Wii Remote. However, I played with the classic controller, because I can't play with anything fucking else. You use the left analog stick to move the character. You can press the right trigger to jump, and if you press it again, you can use it to double jump. However, some characters cannot double jump. I'm looking at you, Golem! Then you can press the B button to do a normal attack, but if you hold on to the B button and other buttons, you can do special attacks. You can use the Y button to unleash your sub-weapon, but you can also hold onto the Y button and release a super version of your sub-weapon. The left trigger is used to guard, and the X button is used for hyper attacks. Then the right analog stick is to evade, meaning to dodge, which I know some of you are gonna have some problems with because I know damn well nobody fucking dodges in this fucking game. With all the basic controls being established, allow me to give my opinions on them. I don't think they're bad by any means, but oh my god do they need some getting used to. And I think that's the problem with a lot of people, as they don't really want to give Judgement like the time of day to learn any of these controls, because they're already so intact with other games like Soul Calibur, Tekken, Mortal Kombat, God only knows. Now, is the game perfect? No, because some characters just outright deny your very fucking existence, but that's just besides the point. The controls themselves, as well as these specific controls on certain characters, they either, on occasion, just do not feel right, or just lack certain things about those said moves that probably should have been there to begin with. What I'm trying to say here is that, although it's not perfect, it definitely is functional, and there's some credence here. It's not like there's nothing here. However, if you were expecting god tier levels of gameplay, you're just not going to find it. Granted, doing combos is fun, but you can definitely tell that this game, at times, does not enforce you to do combos. Instead, what it forces you to do is try to fill up your meter in order to try and defeat the opponent using your hyper attack. Which, I'll be honest, let's get into those, why don't we? So, the hyper attacks in this game are different, so to speak, meaning that each and every character has a certain hyper attack that is correspondent to them. And, of course, for some fucking reason, each of the characters do different damage with their hyper attacks. And by different damage, I only mean like a select few characters do less than the average damage for some reason. Grant is one of those characters, who for some reason his hyper attack, despite being Storm of Daggers falling onto the opponent, for some reason it just does less than half, which kind of astounds me. But it gets better than that, because apparently Death's hyper attack does less than half as well. And honestly, I do not see how his hyper attack does less than half of your health. Considering the fact that, oh, I don't fucking know, look what's on the screen right fucking now. But in regards to those hyper attacks, allow me to present my overall opinions on each of these hyper attacks, with a tier list. So in the S tier we have Aeon, Dracula, Carmilla, Death, and Shanoa. By far, these hyper attacks were the most satisfying to see in the entire game. As to whether or not they were the easiest to pull off, that's a different discussion. In the A tier, we have Golem and Cornell, and I will definitely say that these two, although aren't S tier, are still really fucking good. And in fact, watching Golems is like watching Cell getting evaporated by a giant Kamehameha.
Oh, how cute! He named it! Oh shit!
Then in the B tier, it's more so like an average, but I still view it as really good. More specifically Grant's, but Eric's is good too. Grant's hyper attack is definitely good, as it's kind of the opposite of the way he acts throughout the fight, as he finally takes shit seriously and chooses to do a water sea Dornays and fucking sends strings and daggers all over your ass. But then we have the C tier, which I find to be average or below average, and those characters are Simon, Alucard, Sypha, and Maria. And holy crap, does it not feel very satisfying at all to pull them off. And in fact, I think some of their hyper attacks are some of the easiest to fucking use. Doesn't help either that, in my opinion, Simon's is just him making a circle whip with just his whip attacks and just ending it off with one final whip to just seal the deal. Then we have Alucard's hyper attack, which is kind of ruined by Yuri Lowenthal's betrayal, I'm sorry. Then in Sypha's, we just have her sealing the opponent in a seal, and then just having elements like fire, electricity, and ice just surround it, and then boom, compact into one. And then Maria, well, she's doing Maria things. But unfortunately in D tier, we have Trevor Belmont, which his only use of the hyper attack is to launch a whip at the opponent, and that's it. I shit you not, that's his hyper attack. Who on the team thought this was a good idea to leave with fucking Trevor C. Belmont? Honest to God, who thought for like a minute? However, now that we've discussed my opinions on how they are, let's discuss how easy they are to pull off. And we will be using the same tier list system in order to help better demonstrate as to how either easy it is to pull some of these supers off, or how stupendously ludicrous it is to try and do it. To no one's surprise, in the S tier we have Golem, Death, and Dracula. Golem's is easy to do because his hyper attack radius is super fucking large for no particular reason. Death's hyper attack can literally be initiated from any point of the stage and you'll still get hit. And then Dracula's is the same story, where he'll just fade away and then just magically show up behind you and then boom, you're getting demonic Magidude. These supers are so easy to pull off that I literally initially had the A tier and the S tier, and the B tier and the A tier, but I had to move them down due to how ludicrously easy it is for these characters to pull their supers off. It is ridiculous. Then in the A tier, we have Simon Belmont, Alucard, Maria, Grant, and Trevor. Most of these consists of them dashing towards the opponent, and usually they'll have a likely success rate of them actually hitting you and pulling off their hyper attack. But if you had to ask me, the character I've had most trouble in this tier with trying to land hyper attacks was definitely Maria, cause oh my god is she fucking clumsy. Then in the B tier we have Sypha Belnades and LeCarde, who, may I add, although LeCarde follows the same formula as most of the characters in A tier, his hyper attack, to me anyway, has definitely been more of a struggle to try and hit rather than the other characters in the A tier, which is why he's in the B tier. Then we have Sypha, which, instead of dashing towards the opponent, she'll do a slight movement forward with her staff, and that'll be the end of it, to try and engage with the hyper attack. Hence why she's in the B tier. She doesn't have the range, but she does have the practicality and the use in order to pull it off. Then in the C tier, we have Shanoa, and holy shit does it get bad from here. Trying to activate her hyper attack is one of the hardest to do in the entire fucking game. However, I say that, but there are still 3 characters left below her, who Konami thought it was a good idea to try and make her use a lance, that not only does she have to circle around her body instead of just sending it outward, but it on top of that has a slim hitbox, which for the most part doesn't even go full forward. And by full forward, I mean anywhere away from Shanoa, which is honestly astounding. Mostly, you can only hit characters that are either Golem or aren't moving at all, and that is the summary of Shanoa's activation of a hyper attack. Then in the D tier, from my experience, we have Carmilla, Cornell, and Aeon. It sucks that they have some of the best hyper attacks in the game, and yet they're so restricted by the fact that trying to hit them is fucking sucky as all hell. Carmilla and Cornell specifically struggle in this fact, considering that they both go backwards and then lunge forward in order to perform it. And for the most part, I have missed this certain attack landing on the opponent due to the fact that the opponent can simply move out of the way once you actually do it. And then there's Aeon, and holy shit. The only way Aeon will ever perform his super naturally is if he ever gets into his 3rd phase of his super attack, and by super attack I mean his special that you can charge, and stop time, in which he then will be able to do his super without any impunity. But the problem is that if he were to do it naturally, the setup to try and do it takes so fucking long that by the time you can actually reach Aeon, if you were at the end of the stage, you can actually interrupt him before he can actually do it. Meaning that his entire super could go to waste due to its duration. It is honestly stupid. But with all the hyper attacks out of the way, I think I would like to give my overall opinions on the characters and their movesets. By far, I think the funnest characters in the game, in my opinion, are Aeon, Death, and Cornell. In regards to Death, he has one of the most fluid movesets I have ever had the pleasure of experiencing in this game. He is the most versatile, he's the most speedy, and oh my god, does it feel amazing to do anything with him. Same goes for Cornell. He's speedy, he hits hard, and he has an alternate mode where he'll go apeshit and start wrecking the living shit out of the opponent. You better pray his freaking meter ends before the round does, because oh my god, he'll finish you within a minute. Then there's Aeon, and I know people will have some contention with him. However, me personally, I found a lot of fun with him, and believe it or not, he's my practical main. And I understand that not many people like having to deal with his many different types of moves, but his giant laser, his giant arms of a clock trying to snap you like damn scissors, I find to be very fun. Especially, although like I said before, his hyper attack takes forever to pull off, I think it's one of the best hyper attacks in the entire game, making him one of the best characters to pull off and play in general. Then in A tier we have LeCarde, Dracula, Shanoa, Alucard, and Trevor. Now, despite Dracula being one of the most overpowered characters in this fucking game, I don't feel fun playing with him as much as I do with the S tier characters. More so because although, yeah, he's kind of broken, he's also kind of slow to boot, which, I'll be honest, is kind of fair, but it just kind of diminishes any or all mobility when it comes to Dracula, and I like my characters to have a bit of movement, you know? Then there's LeCarde, which, although I don't like him very much, I can admit that I do like his moveset, and it is very fluid and it feels very fun to play. Shanoa is also on that same boat, as her moveset is very fun to play with. However, the one thing I hate is her evade, which basically just turns her into a damn hamster. Then there's Alucard, which, yeah, he's middle of the road, but he is still pretty fun to play with, despite not me liking his specials very much, like his Soul Steal and his Lightning, considering how much I missed those attacks. Then there's Trevor, which basically he's just like Simon Belmont, except he's more handsy and likes to throw a few more punches. And holy crap, does punching literally anything and causing people to go flat on the ground feel so goddamn satisfying. Then, speaking of Simon Belmont, we have the B tier, in which he's the only character that occupies it. He's basically the middle of the road. He's fun, but he'll get boring after a while. But if you do like your main characters, then I suggest sticking with Simon. Then in the C tier, we have Maria, Sypha, and Grant. As much as I like Grant as a character, I do not like his moveset very much. It's like trying to play Sheik in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. It just doesn't feel very fun. Granted, he does have that one move where he can spam daggers like an actual asshole, but once again, that doesn't last forever, now does it? In Sypha Belnades' case, she's basically like a discount version of Sypha, in which I don't feel as much fun playing her as I do with her. Granted, she has a few moves that I kind of do like, but then again, discount Sypha. Then in Maria's case, it's like with Dracula. Just because she has overpowered moves like the giant tsunami and the fucking annoying ass fire cyclone does not mean I have fun playing with her. In fact, those are the only two moves I spam with her on occasion. That is all. I do not like playing as Maria whatsoever. But below that, we have the D tier, and the only two occupants of the D tier are Carmilla and Golem. The reason why I don't like playing as Carmilla is pretty obvious, as her moveset is Grant but worse. For some reason, the AI knows exactly how to play Carmilla, but when any other human being tries to pick up Carmilla, nobody knows how to fucking play her properly. I've tried using the whip attack and trying to use multiple of her combo strings just to try and fly by, and holy crap does she fucking suck. She's the worst version of Grant by a long shot, and by Jesus, her hook shot is avoidable by most evades in the entire game, especially with characters who can just instantly teleport behind you. But we're not even getting to the worst of it, and holy shit does Golem take the cake for one of the worst characters in the entire fucking game. Not only is he slow, but his dash is one of the stupidest. It's basically just Shanoa's but worse, movement-wise. And his attacks are slow as ever-living shit. The only thing good about him is his hyper attack and the fact that some of his attacks are basically, you can't penetrate them. But other than that, he is so easy to clown on, it's hilarious. But with all that out of the way, I think I rambled enough about the gameplay of Castlevania Judgement. Yes, it's not perfect, and there's many flaws to it, but that doesn't mean that there aren't positives to it as well. Is the game trying to rip off Soul Calibur? I don't know, maybe, but it doesn't mean it's not worth checking out for your own. And if you actually like it more than Soul Calibur, I'll honestly be astounded, but I'll also be glad, as you can finally find something that you find enjoyable. Alright, now we have to cover the modes, and there really isn't all that much, so this one will be pretty brief. Story mode! I think we already went over that one, so I don't really have to go over much on this. Arcade mode! It's essentially story mode, just without any of the fancy cutscenes and whatnot. All the battle, none of the fluff. If you want just regular battles and nothing else to do, you have arcade mode for that. Then we have survival mode, which is exactly what it sounds like. Basically, you're thrown into a gauntlet, and you basically have to survive for as long as possible. And this is one of the modes where you will not be able to recover your health. You basically have to do it all in one go. And it's basically an endurance test as to see how long you can last. Then we have versus mode, which is basically what I like to call versus CPU mode, because that's basically what I fucking use it for. If you want to play it with either someone locally, or if you want to play it with a CPU, this is what versus mode is for. Basically, you get to choose your fighter, and basically what stage you get to play on. Honestly, it's kind of the best mode in the game, considering you could basically choose the circumstances between each of the fights, but that's besides the point. Wi-Fi is essentially playing online. I'm not gonna go over too much of it, because I doubt anyone's playing Wi-Fi anytime soon. Then there's castle mode. Oh my fucking god, I hate castle mode so fucking much. The reason why I hate this fucking mode, astonishingly more than many people might, is because of the fact that castle mode is absolutely dogshit. Now, in concept, you are basically wandering a castle. It starts off with a cutscene, and basically you are left to reign as to what to do with the path in the castle. Sounds cool, right? Until you realize it's basically a challenge gauntlet throughout the entire fucking castle, where each of the battles are differently orchestrated with different challenges, and on top of that, if you even so much as fuck up once during the match, you can't retry it. No. What instead you have to do is that you have to go back to your latest save point and do everything all over again. So if you have a challenge where you have enemies constantly destroying crystals or boxes, and you fail it before you can even get to the save point, you are fucked, and you are going to try it from the very fucking beginning. Hence, this mode incentivizes you to save at every single opportunity you are given, because if you don't, you are fucked. And on top of that, each character's castle mode is different. The only positive thing I can say about castle mode is that you are given the opportunity to unlock new outfits and accessories for the different characters, and upon beating each character's castle mode, which by the way, you have to kill Dracula at the each and every end of castle mode with each and every character, you will be granted basically art of the character, the theme of the character, and essentially that's all I can name from memory. It is the most mind-numbing thing since having to play fucking Lords of Shadow 1, which I did do recently, by the way, and if you want my further opinions on that, don't worry, I'll talk about it one day. But other than that, I have hated most of my time playing castle mode. It's one of the stupidest fucking modes in this fucking game. And it sucks because you can tell that this was the mode that they kind of put most of their effort into. That wasn't story mode. Next, we have viewing mode, which all it is that you're looking at the music and the art that you have obtained within the game. You can listen to the music, you can listen to the characters and the multiple voice lines, and you can look at the character's artwork, which, if you ask me, is pretty good for 2008 standards. Then we have accessories, which is essentially you are customizing the characters with the accessories that you are able to obtain within the game. But there's also another thing that you can do, and that is to connect your Castlevania Judgement to the DS via Castlevania Order of Ecclesia, which allows you to unlock hard mode level cap raises to 255 in Order of Ecclesia, the Queen of Hearts item in Order of Ecclesia, and it instantly allows you to play as Aeon and Shanoa in Judgement, and allows for new accessories. Which, if you ask me, isn't all too much of a good deal, but regardless, it was made to tie the two games together at one point. See why I think this game was trying to service to Shanoa or Aeon? Regardless of that, these were the modes. And if it was not for castle mode, I wouldn't give two shits about the rest of the modes in this fucking game. Most of these game modes were practically made to service out the playtime of this game, and it shows. But regardless of that, we can move on to the next topic. Alright now, we can finally cover the main thing that I've been wanting to cover since this entire review started. The fucking characters. I wanted to voice my opinions on the characters and whether or not I like them or not. Starting with the Warriors of Light because I think that will be the easiest to go off of. Now, in regards to Simon Belmont, I'm not necessarily a fan of his design, yet I don't outright hate it. I do like his voice actor, that's for sure. I think he was voiced excellently in this game. However, I think the short hair on Simon is... well, it's a bit, well, you know. And I know this game was made by the artist for Death Note, but I don't think that's really much of a hindrance at all. I know people like to use it as a crutch against, oh, bad character design, but I think it's more so the sense that it was more so genuinely questionable design choices, rather than a change of art style, really. Because no one really said the same thing about Portrait of Ruin, Order of Ecclesia, or Dawn of Sorrow. Well, they kind of said it for Dawn of Sorrow because Aria of Sorrow had a definitely better art style than it, but however, when it comes to Simon's design in Judgement, I think it's one of his weakest ones, and that's definitely saying something considering that now that I've played Lords of Shadow 2, I don't hold his design there to be much of scrutiny, as I've kind of gotten used to it, but I'm still not a fan of it. I'd say it's worse than his Smash appearance, but I definitely think it's better than his Simon's Quest appearance, if that makes any sense. Then after that we have Maria Renard, and oh my god, do I think she is... I fucking hate her in this fucking game. For some reason they tried to make her a lot more childish in this game, and very boob-centric for no particular reason. Her design mimics that of the character from Death Note, where she's, I think, the second Kira, but oh my lord, does she look... well, she doesn't look bad by any means, but holy Christ, is it a far cry from the Maria we know. And it doesn't help either that we've seen better Maria designs, especially from Rondo of Blood, Symphony of the Night, fricking Dracula X Chronicles. Hell, even Vampire Kiss had a better design than this. So it makes me wonder, why exactly did we choose to go for a child version of Maria when we already had like a 17-year-old Maria from Symphony of the Night? But trust me, there's another character that they changed that I will get into later I'm baffled by. But in regards to Maria, I think, design-wise, her outfit's fine, it's just that her character is just not it. It's not Maria. She acts completely different from how we expected her up to that point. Sure, she's bubbly, but she's not fucking obsessed with boobs to the point where it's absolutely nauseating. Then we can move on to the next character being Trevor Belmont, and oh my god, if anyone had to draw a caricature of Trevor Belmont, it would be this. Like, I don't know how you went from his design from Dracula's Curse, then you go to Curse of Darkness, which I believe that is his best design by a long shot, and then we move on to Castlevania Judgement, where he just looks like this. I don't know how the fuck we make him look like Jotaro fucking Kujo if he was a fucking pirate, but my god, can we revert back to what it was? Especially considering that most of this game's assets just reused Curse of Darkness all over again. I am not a fan of his design by any means necessary. Even if I were to ironically put this design over his anime appearance, it's not even that. Like, it sucks. Like, I genuinely do not think it's good. His character, on the other hand, it's decent, I guess, but it's like very one-dimensional and one-note, so I can't really comment on anything there. Like, sorry, anime fans, but if you were expecting this Trevor to act anything like the Trevor you see in the anime, I'm sorry, it's not him. And it's not even like the Trevor from Curse of Darkness either, because he just... there's no character here. Granted, I do like his voice actor, I have nothing against it, but I'm still kind of used to Curse of Darkness's voice actor for Trevor, rather than this. So you can kind of understand that every time I listen to Trevor, I don't feel... it's not Trevor to me. I still also don't think that the Castlevania anime Trevor is Trevor, but that's just me. Then moving on from that, we have Sypha, and holy shit is she super dislikable. She is an outright hypocrite for most of her fucking story. She is an utter bitch when it comes down to it, and it doesn't help either that the fucking era they chose to take Sypha out of was when she knew fucking nobody and treats everyone like a fucking witch. which is fucking hilarious considering that she's one herself. Her design, I think it's one of the best ones. It's not bad by any means. If you were to ask a Japanese artist to make a caricature of someone who worked in a fucking church, you'd end up with Sypha Belnades' current design. I like how very over-the-top it is. I like the very church iconography on her body. And her clothes, I think, are a very good color scheme. It's definitely better than just the hooded robes from Castlevania 3, and it's definitely better than what they chose for her design in the pachinko slots. As to whether it's better than her Castlevania anime design, that's debatable. Granted, in the anime I really like her personality, as she's funny, she's witty, she knows how to handle herself at times, and she's more of a group player. In Castlevania Judgement, she can honestly give less of a shit. My lord, I fucking hate her so much. Then, right after that, we go into another fucking character I hate beyond comparison. It is LeCarde. And let me ask you this, Koji Garashi. Why the fuck did you ask the dev team or the fucking designers of this game to turn LeCarde into a fucking child? Or if this is a question I need to direct to the fucking artist, why did you choose to make LeCarde, who was already a fucking adult and we've never seen him as a fucking child, into a fucking child, and now we're just fucking here? Oh my god, why? This character makes me question executive decisions, why? Okay, breathe. Breathe, Trevor, breathe. You are losing your composure. If you lose any more, you're gonna fucking turn apeshit. Now, let me explain as to why I hate Eric and his fucking design. I hate LeCarde because he is a snot-nosed fucking brat who believes that he is tough shit 100% of the bloody time. Now, his design is so freaking basic to his time period. Hell, even before his time period, it makes little to no sense. And I'm still questioning as to why the dev team thought it was a good idea to make LeCarde, a character that we've never seen him as a child, into a child. My only guess is that they chose to make him a child in order for Maria to have a partner. However, if you really wanted to do that, you could have just created, I don't know, a fucking goblin character for the Warriors of the Night. Why didn't they do that? But you know what? This game is plagued by constant questionable decisions, so I think we're just going to move on from LeCarde before I throw my fists towards a wall. The next character we have to go over is Shanoa, and I'll be honest, as much as I'm not a fan of her design, I don't outright hate it. Because it's not bad by any means, it still reigns true to what Shanoa is as a character. Yeah, her design is practically pretty much inoffensive, and her voice actor is actually pretty good. If Konami were to have Shanoa be voiced again in any potential Castlevania game, I'd say go with the person that they chose to represent Shanoa in this game. Speaking of designs, let's move on to Grant. As much of a cool design I think Grant has, I do not view this as Grant. Granted, his personality is 1000% Grant, and I fucking love it. But my theory is that originally, Grant was actually supposed to be a mummy, and we were going to have a mummy character instead of Grant. But somebody on the dev team made a last-minute decision to change the mummy into Grant, which potentially could be why Grant looks like a fucking mummy. I'm just making educated guesses as to why certain characters get very questionable redesigns. But I don't dislike Grant by any means. Not even one bit. I think he's one of the coolest looking characters in the game. Now we move on to the Warriors of the Night, and let's start off with Alucard. Design-wise, I'm not a fan. It's trying too much to make Alucard into a Death Note character, and frankly, I just don't like it too much. Especially considering that we're all accustomed to his Symphony of the Night appearance. Then again, there's also his anime appearance, which I'm not a fan of either, but moving on. And then there's the very pronounceable voice acting by our favorite, Yuri Lowenthal. And I've said this to many people out of my videos, but people who have known me will possibly know that there are cases where I like Yuri Lowenthal, and there are cases where I don't. This is one of those cases where I don't like him voicing a certain character. I do not like Alucard being voiced by Yuri Lowenthal. To me, he just sounds like a depressed teenager, and frankly, that is not what Alucard is. He also voices him in Smash. I do not like him there either, and he also voices him in the port of Symphony of the Night in Castlevania Requiem, and in the port in Castlevania Dracula X Chronicles, which I, once again, do not like. Why couldn't they just get Robert Belgrade? Like, he was perfect! Robert Belgrade as Alucard was perfection, and I can't think of any other person to voice Alucard other than him. Minus the person who voiced him in Grimoire of Souls, I think he was also a good substitution, but out of all the voices Alucard has had thus far, I think Yuri Lowenthal is definitely the worst. Nothing against Yuri Lowenthal, I'm not a fan of his voice acting in this game, especially considering that the script writing in this game is, like, abysmally off. Then the next character we have to go over is Cornell, and oh my god, he is the best character in this game without question. He's the best character in this game, -1. So technically he's the second best. I think his voice is perfect, his design is perfect, his moveset is perfect. It is one of the best redesigns I've seen for a Castlevania character in a very long time. Considering how Cornell looked in Castlevania 64, I'm telling you, we are on the peak of perfection here. I do not like Cornell in Castlevania 64. He looked way too out of place, and considering that his art style primarily focused on 3D art, he did not look good. So to see him reappear again in this game, and to look as cool as he does, and to be voiced by such a perfect actor. By the way, that actor who voices Cornell is the same person who voices Xemnas, which is why, in the story mode, I made so many fucking Kingdom Hearts jokes out of him. But besides that, I think he's voiced perfectly. I think some of his lines are a bit but other than that, I think he is wonderful in this game. The next character we have to go over is Carmilla, and oh my fucking god, I hate her so much. I never want to see her ever again. What is it with Konami around this time, and trying to make Carmilla a fucking sex symbol? I do not understand whatsoever. Originally, Carmilla was a fucking head, and then in Rondo she shows up again, but then she's a head plus a woman behind it. Then, in fucking Circle of the Moon, she shows up as an actual character, has dialogue, but then turns into a giant head again with a fucking succubus attached to it. And then here, she just fucking looks like succubus. I do not understand how we've gotten to this point, and it honestly astounds me that Carmilla in the anime acts the way and dresses the way that she does, considering the past of the character looking like this. But oh my lordy lord. Nothing against the voice actress for Carmilla, she's probably a nice person, but oh my god, do I never want to hear anything Carmilla has to say, because it sounds so dirty and raunchy that oh my lord, I feel awful just by listening to a single sentence that Carmilla ushers out, because it's so sexually explicit that I honestly cannot. She is so suggestive, and it's beyond parody as to how suggestive she is. Jesus. And if you like Carmilla, that's fine, but frankly, a vampire with standards could not. Carmilla is just... stay away from me. I think she's one of the bottom of the barrel characters in this game, along with Eric LeCarde and fucking Sypha Belnades. Keep her away from me. Then we have Golem, and... yeah, he exists. I don't understand why Golem, out of all characters, is in this game, and frankly, I kinda wish he wasn't, cause he's just kind of a waste of a slot if you ask me. It could have gone to practically anyone else, so the fact that it's just Golem is... astounding. He also looks kind of eerily creepy, especially for the fact that he's acting like a damn child, so to that extent, it's even creepier. Like seriously, what are those freaking lips? It's like I'm looking at a character drawn by the freaking people in the 1930s trying to draw a black person. Like, the ever-living hell is this? Regardless of that, it's very plainly obvious that I don't fancy myself with Golem. And it's not so much because I hate him, it's more so because I could have rather had anything else. And frankly, he's just very uninteresting. In fact, his story is so uninteresting, I skipped it for obvious reasons. Then the next character we get to move on to is Death, and I think this is one of the coolest versions of Death that we've seen in a hot minute. Granted, I think that Death in games like Castlevania Bloodlines, Symphony of the Night, Rondo of Blood, Harmony of Dissonance, those were cooler versions of Death. Because, you know, he was dressed. But to see Death in such like a form that he's in this game is honestly, it's kind of eerie, but it's also cool as ever-living shit. His scythe, his voice, his overall design is honestly cool as shit. And the fact that he runs around the stage as fast as he does is also a really cool thing that he does. It's really nothing, but it's just one of those aesthetic things that I just really enjoy in games sometimes. Then we have Dracula, and yeah, I don't like him very much. Yeah, believe it or not, I think this design, despite how over the top it is, it's one of his weakest designs I've ever seen. And that's considering all the old Castlevania Dracula designs. Like in Castlevania 1, 2, 3, Adventure, all of those. And the reason being is that they chose to give him Sonic 06 syndrome and decided to add fucking barnacles to his nipples. I don't know why, but they chose to do that anyway, and chose to make his fucking neck into a fucking sea anemone. I think his design is way too over the top to be any good. Like, if we just went back to Lament of Innocence or Curse of Darkness designs, I think we would have been solid. But the fact that they chose to go very over the top with him is just... I'm sorry. Usually over the top is good, but in this case, it's... nah. It's not. Moving on. And the last character we have to talk about is Aeon, and despite all the footage I've shown of you thus far, and everything that I've shown you about Aeon, I genuinely love him. I adore Aeon so bloody much. He is just one of those characters that most people probably shouldn't like all too much, but they end up loving him anyway. And for me, it's like Stockholm Syndrome. Aeon, although emotionless and kind of bland in his line delivery, I think serves his character so fucking neatly, considering that I expect a character who looks like that to sound like that, you know? And I think everything just paired so well together. And honestly, he is my #1 character in this game, and it's kind of why I main him. He's so perfect in every way to me. Despite many people saying that he's bland, okay, I'll accept it. But his design, his monocle, his hair, his vest, his clothing, his voice, all of it pairs so well together to create such a perfect union of a character. And it's why that I love Aeon so much. And, can someone figure out how to mend time so he can show up again? And the last character, technically, we have to go over is the Time Reaper. This is the laziest villain I've ever seen. We all know that Konami is famous for reusing assets, but holy shit, is it not that famous enough for them to reuse literal boss assets, then fucking renaming the character, giving it a new voice, giving it a new story, and just writing it off as a new character. This is literally the most fan OC shit I've ever fucking seen, and it's astoundingly telling. Like, out of all the things you could have done, why reuse Curse of Darkness's assets just to make a new villain? And it... oh my god, it astounds me. Also, this character says that he is 10,000 years from the future. There's only one game that takes place 10,000 years in the future. It's Kid Dracula. You mean to fucking tell me that Kid Dracula, out of all things, is canon because of Castlevania Judgment's fucking shenanigans? Are you serious? There is no fucking way that the same Galamoth that I fucking see in Kid Dracula, who got defeated by a fucking kid version of Dracula, is the same Galamoth that sent the Time Reaper to the Time Rift to cause shenanigans. There is no fucking way that it's the same shit. I cannot believe it. You know what, I'm just gonna gaslight myself into thinking that the Galamoth we're talking about is the Galamoth from Symphony of the Night, because there's no way in hell that I'm gonna believe in this nonsense. Anyway, now that we've discussed all the characters, and my overall tastes and distastes of them, we can finally move on to more pressing matters. Alrighty then. The next thing we have to talk about is the game's stages. There are about 10 stages, each of them having their own distinct theme from one another, and each of their own references. Now, I want to go over this section more so because I wanted to go over what I believe each stage to be representing. However, there are some stages that are kind of obvious as to what they're representing, so it'll just be me more so ranting about the stages and what they represent, and maybe some of my own thoughts on each of these stages. But anyway, let's get to it. The first stage we have to go over is the Abbey Ruins, and believe it or not, this stage is actually a reference to Castlevania Chronicles. Finally, some Castlevania Chronicles representation! This area is actually meant to be where the Black Mass is held, which essentially is a ritual that is made by the followers of darkness in order to resurrect Dracula. The next area we have is the Alchemy Laboratory, and despite being named after the same area that's in Symphony of the Night, so believe it or not, despite actually being called the Alchemy Laboratory, I also think it's actually a reference to the Anti-Souls Mysteries Lab in Lament of Innocence. Why do I say that? Well, I don't know, the place is fucking full with lava and it looks like a damn furnace. The only other Castlevania location I can think of is the Anti-Souls Mysteries Laboratory. So, yeah, despite being called Alchemy Laboratory, I actually think it's Anti-Souls Mysteries Laboratory, which they could still possibly do the same thing. There's still alchemy beakers all over the damn place in that original Lament of Innocence map. So honestly, I don't see there much being a difference. However, if you want to view it as a Symphony of the Night reference or a Lament of Innocence reference, that's up to you. The next stage we have is the Castle Gate, and it's decent-ish. It's more so one of those gimmicky stages where most of the stage just falls off the more you play onto it, because there's like a giant fish, who isn't from Curse of Darkness, by the way, decides to jump into the bridge and destroy parts of it, allowing for more parts of the bridge to be open. Now, if you ask me, I believe this area is a reference to Curse of Darkness's abandoned castle. Why? Because the terrain looks exactly the same, most of the area looks exactly the same, and the castle that is in front of the said bridge, or the Castle Gate, meanwhile, is very oddly similar to that same castle. So, if you ask me, it's the abandoned castle from Curse of Darkness without really much a shadow of the doubt. The next area we have is the Cathedral, and it's kind of hard to pinpoint what this could be a reference to, considering that there's so many cathedral stages in Castlevania as a series, but if I had to guess, my assumption would be that this specific cathedral is meant to be the Garibaldi Temple from Curse of Darkness. Now, the reason why I believe that is because of the demon statue that is within the cathedral, and how it looks very similar to flame demons, or the lesser demon that is found within the Garibaldi Temple, which is why I believe specifically that this could be a reference to that. The only thorn in my theory for that is if you break the glasses, it showcases a castle, and yeah, it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly, but for now, I'm just going to say that this cathedral is a reference to the Garibaldi Temple. Then we have the Clock Tower, and yeah, I don't really think it's a reference to anything. I think this is one of the cases where it's actually a unique stage to this game, considering how not similar it is to other Castlevania Clock Towers we've had thus far. However, if I had to throw in a guess in there, I'd probably say that the closest I can probably think of is any of the Castlevania games Clock Towers that have grey walls. So, sorry Harmony of Dissonance, but it ain't you. Moving on from the Clock Tower, we now have the Crystal Cavern. And there's two possible guesses as to what this stage could be. The first could be the underground section of the abandoned castle from Curse of Darkness, or it could be the Mortivia Aqueducts from the same game. Frankly, I'm more so to believe it's the Mortivia Aqueducts because it's the only part of the game to have an aqueduct, and yeah, it kind of looks like the Mortivia Aqueduct, if you ask me, but I'm open to both suggestions. But if it could be anything else, I'm open to hear it. But frankly, I'm considering how many assets that this game reuses from Curse of Darkness, it wouldn't astound me if this is actually supposed to be a reference to the Mortivia Aqueducts. Then we have the Dimensional Rift, which is one of the stages that is actually home to Castlevania Judgement. As is, it's not really referencing anything, but I guess a fun fact I can throw in here is that usually when Castlevania is represented in Super Smash Bros. Fan games, they always, for some reason, pick this stage to represent Castlevania, which is I'm sorry, but it's really stupid. Out of all the things, you really had to go with the fucking Dimensional Rift? I'm sorry. That was like a completely different rat, and we're just gonna move on. Now we have the Ghost Ship, and honestly, it's kind of a mismatch as to what this could possibly be referencing. Some have stated that it is Death's Ghost Ship from Castlevania Rondo of Blood, or Legacy of Darkness. As to what I believe, I'm more so in the camp that believes that this is supposed to be a reference to Legacy of Darkness. And the reason being is that usually the surrounding area itself more so resembles like the steep ravines that game has. And if you ask me, the surrounding area looks heavily inspired by Castlevania 64. Granted, people have said that they've seen the castle gate in the background, but honestly, I can't see it. But I'm in the room of possible belief that it could be something else. I just frankly believe that this is supposed to be the ship from Legacy of Darkness that Cornell starts off in the game. Moving on to the next stage, we have the Throne Room, which, once again, original to Castlevania Judgement, because I can't name a single throne room that looks any similar to the throne room that we see in Judgement. However, one little small tidbit that I would like to say is that somebody, upon the 3rd season of Castlevania the anime, pointed out that the room that Saint Germain was making his intro or flashback story in looks vaguely similar to this very throne room, which if you compare them side by side, yeah, you can see it. Moving on to the final stage, we have the Torture Chamber, which I'll be looking forward for this to be installed in my castle sometime soon. Anyway, the Torture Chamber is kind of hard to pinpoint. However, if you ask me, I believe it's a combination of two things. Firstly, I believe it is the dungeon from either Castlevania 3 or Rondo of Blood, or it is potentially the first area of Castlevania Bloodlines, because of the giant swinging axe. And if you recall, in that game, one of the most notorious things from that game, in the first stage, was the swinging axe. So, it is possible. Oh, and that stage also had like giant skeletons in it, so more credence to the theory, if you ask me. Yeah, those are my theories on the stages in this game. The stages in this game aren't too bad. I think they're one of the more well-crafted things in this game. It's just that I wish that there was more substance to them. Like, you could tell what these were trying to represent, and I wish that these stages could really stand out on their own. But frankly, they're one of the more forgettable things about this game, considering that it's in a forgettable game, so yeah, it was kind of doomed from the start now, wasn't it? Alright, now the thing we all wanted to talk about, the music. Castlevania Judgement is notorious for its grand and banger music. Unless your name is Elemental Tactician, which I don't know how the fucking music team was able to screw your ass up, but everything else sounds fantastic. And if you're wondering what my favorite songs in the game are, well, allow me to play a little compilation of them for you now. Of course, I won't play the full song because I don't want it to make it seem like I'm just putting everything here and just calling it a day. Instead, I'm just gonna remix and mix all the songs together and see how that turns out. But anyway, enjoy. See what I mean? Aren't all these songs just fantastic to listen to? And from the looks of it, it seems like the OST itself has about 45-ish songs, which is kind of a lot, really. And if you would like to know a tidbit, most of the Castlevania Judgement OST is reused in other games, like Super Smash Bros., where most of the songs that they chose out for certain themes, like Vampire Killer, come specifically from Judgement. But regardless of that, the music in Castlevania Judgement is one of its highlights, and it's one of the best in the series. This might be the shortest section, I don't know, we'll see if in post-production it's going to be the shortest. But yes, let's talk about the visuals. Literally, most of this fucking game is reused from Curse of Darkness. I shit you fucking not. I can guarantee rook textures, character animations, character assets, definitely, and fucking other textures seen within the game are probably reused from Curse of Darkness. There's just no way that it's not. And if you are having trouble believing that, just look at the enemies and the sub-bosses that this game has to offer. If you look at the Merman, straight ripped from Curse of Darkness. If you look at the zombies, straight up ripped from Curse of Darkness again. If you look at the fucking Iron Gladiator, straight up ripped from Curse of Darkness. If you look at the Minotaur, literally the same boss from Curse of Darkness. If you look at the Time Reaper, for fucking out loud, it's death from Curse of fucking Darkness. It astounds me to every fucking degree that they chose to reuse so much and expected it to all be okay and no one complain about it. But once again, since Curse of Darkness's art style is still pretty good, Judgment's, in turn, is still pretty good, despite it fucking copying. And considering what I said about the characters' animations and visual art styles, they're not bad, it's just that they're different. And I see why many people complain about the art style, because it is different. It's the same thing about when people complain about either Dawn of Sorrow or Portrait of Ruin, saying that the art style was too anime, which if you ask me, is a stupid fucking complaint, because if you recall a video I made reacting to WatchMojo's top 10 worst Castlevania games, you remember that Castlevania Judgement was in second, and the person doing the list cited that their main criticism was the art style. That criticism was so fucking stupid, because if you recall, they did not mention a single thing about any other games that have potentially used different art styles, and most of the criticisms were very bare bones. So allow me to offer my more specific criticisms about this game's visual art style. Okay, sure. It uses the art style seen in Death Note. Not completely, but just enough for you to fucking notice, and the characters, for the most part, they aren't bad looking. Sure, some of them are outright just apocalypses on the eyes, but other than that, some of them are actually decent redesigns. Like, for example, characters like Cornell, Death, Grant. Some of them are really good character designs if you just look at it from face value. However, if you look deep into it, you can see that some of the characters probably shouldn't look the way that they do. Like, Grant. Hell, even the new character that they added, being Aeon, he looks perfect. He looks exactly as a Castlevania character would look if he was from the 1800s. But the overall style that the game goes for, it's kind of the same. From a gameplay angle, it goes for something different, which is why most of the complaints are made, because people state that it's just not Castlevania, which, to be fair, it kind of is. Because Castlevania Judgement is born because of the fears that the series was getting too stale. And would you like to know what people were making those complaints? The fans! The people who were playing the games were saying that the series was becoming stale. So what did they do? They decided to reinvoke the series by doing something different. And they got punished for it by the same people who were saying that the series was starting to get stale. From everything that I've been told and everything I've heard from other Castlevania fans discussing the series up until that point, that seemed to have been the case, and as to why Castlevania Judgement was even made to be what it is today. I don't blame Castlevania Judgement for being what it is. I more so blame the people around it for it forming the way that it did. Regardless though, this game visually, it's not bad, especially for a Wii game. It doesn't look the worst thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Trust me, I've seen worse. I just think that certain things like character animations and the cutscenes needed to be worked on a little more. And I kind of wish that each of the characters had proper like endings, like how Mortal Kombat does them. But regardless, I really can't complain much in this regard. Now, what were my thoughts on the game as a whole? I actually had fun with it. Sure, it's not doing anything to reinvent the fighting scene or anything like that. It's not doing its best and damnedest to challenge series titans like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, King of Fighters, Tekken, Soul Calibur. It's not doing any of that. Practically inoffensive compared. But for what it does try to do, it's decent. It's not bad as many people try to say that it is. Sure, people may have trouble with the gameplay, but once again, as some people have stated to me in the past, that's a skill issue. As usually, most people don't like to play the game for all too long and just give up after like a few minutes. But if you keep on trying and give the game a chance to show you everything that it has to offer, I'm sure, granted, you won't be blown out of the water, but you'll be decently surprised, and you'll probably have a fun time. Sure, the story mode isn't much, but it offers something to do. Sure, the castle mode is fucking tedious, but at least it offers you something to do. That isn't menial, at least. The customization, although very bare bones, is pretty funny considering the characters you're actually customizing with what. Like seriously, why the fuck would anyone put mustaches on these people? But regardless, I think that Castlevania Judgement, for all its flaws, it's still a good game. It's just that people need to give it a shot and give it a chance. The music in this game, it's amazing. The visuals, although not perfect, they still try. The stages, although not memorable, are still good to look at. The worst I can say about Castlevania Judgement is that it's forgettable. And honestly, this game, it's honestly worth actually playing through. Will I ever play Castlevania Judgement again? No, because I kind of signed an order from a friend that I would never play the game again. But if I hadn't done that, I would probably play it time in, time out. But regardless of that, Castlevania Judgement receives about 5 Medusa heads out of 10. It's not bad, but it's not good either. And if you genuinely want to try the game, I 1000% recommend you do, as you probably will regret it. Okay, when I open this door, Alucard will not be there. He's still fucking there.
Yo, Valentina. Did you get that thing you were looking for? I do hope it's those Christmas decorations I keep hearing about. Seriously, this castle is very mute, and I think we need them. Also, because Matthew ate all of them. Figured, and please stay away from the door. You do not want to come any closer. Oh please, you're probably being overdramatic like you usually do. Step away from the door.
No, Summer, please, this time I'm not being overdramatic. Please stay away from the damn door.
Alright, what do we got here?
Ah, Soma. So this is where you went.
I should have listened.
Oh please, what is the fuss about? Besides, I doubt it's of any danger to us. Come in. Oh my god, Yahim, you are such an idiot. You practically just let death into our damn house.
On the contrary, Valentine, I'm here for my own personal business, and that is to celebrate the holidays with you.
What?
Oh, I think I now know who was sending those secret Santa letters.
Besides, my father kicked me out of the castle and I need somewhere to stay momentarily before I can get back on my feet. So, the first person I thought of, surprisingly,
was you.
Really? Me? Count Valentine? A vampire who has been sucking on human souls for nearly a millennia. That is the person you first thought of. Why couldn't you go to the Belmonts? I'm sure they're not doing anything busy.
You know, I thought so too until I actually went to the Belmont home. Currently they're busy with their own affairs, something that I cannot deal with. So, the only other option was you or Carmilla.
Ugh. Okay, you made your point. However, I can't simply accept you. We aren't in my castle anymore. In fact, now that I think about it, how did you get to Walter's castle? There's the whole internal forest thing, and I'm pretty sure you probably got lost on the way here.
I had a tracker installed in Soma in case of events like this, where he would turn evil and choose to abandon society. And in this case, it seems to have been useful for once.
Oh, that wretch! I should have known there was something in that fucking code of his. Not to be a bother or anything, but isn't it rude to not sit our guests at the table? After all, it is Christmas, and I'm sure we have a feast planned out. Right? Yes, we do, Yahim. We do indeed have food and other amenities. However, I was hoping that we'd wait for Walter because he is not here at the moment.
Wait, are we talking about the same Walter who was used for the Crimson Stone that now my father possesses?
Yes, that Walter. If you ask me, those two have been going quite buddy-buddy. And I'll relay this to you, my fellow vampire.
I am a Dhampir.
Same difference. I think that those two are actually a couple. Can't you really believe it? Now. Let's put away all the rumors and just sit at the fucking table. I'll make sure to get Soma from outside as he's practically, well, on fire as we speak.
No, if I hadn't been set on fire, thanks a lot, I probably would have thought that you had all this food taken from some random restaurant and brought over here.
And I will say this, the food is very delectable. All of it has different flavors that just combine together into one magical mush. And the wine is too good to be true.
Probably above compliments, but I will say that the food was tasty.
Oh, thank you, everyone. I'd like to thank the fact that I had the time and patience to make these meals, all due to impart with natural ingredients of human flesh. I'm kidding.
You know, at this point, I don't think there's practically anything that can ruin this Christmas dinner. Alright, I'm finally back with the groceries. You should have been there, it was absolutely
Oh! Hi! Walter?
Oh my fucking god.